it's something that I use in my own parenting life, right? As far as like how I treat and teach my kids, making mistakes, right? So like we I think it's probably human nature, not necessarily a man or a woman thing, but like we try to run from mistakes or mask the fact that we're making mistakes or never really want to talk about us making mistakes. And I mean, personally, I still haven't gotten away from that feeling of like, wanting to dodge it. But at the same time, it is the best teacher when you make mistakes and you learn from them. Almost nothing can teach you better than that. And being able to make mistakes in an environment that allows for you to do that and have it be a vehicle of growth is very powerful, right? And so I've made the mistake many times, and I know many parents who have done the same, where your child makes a mistake and you ridicule them and you put them down and you make them feel like they just committed a sin. And in reality, it's your opportunity as a parent to teach or maybe reteach what it is, the lesson that you're trying to get them to understand. Same goes for when you're having conversations with a trusted group. You have to make it, or I recommend it's made a safe space for mistakes to be told and no judgment to be passed. Because I'm a part of a brotherhood, a fraternity that I got into when I was in college. We've got everything from convicted felons, people doing life, to doctors and prestigious people, and everyone is the same, right? We treat each other with the same kind of respect. You made different choices in life that landed you in different places. That doesn't take away from the good that you can still provide to the world, even if you are in a tiny cell doing a life bit.
Yeah. Well, let's dive a little deeper into that. So, going into that, applying to fatherhood, holding our children accountable is different than grown men because, grown men typically have emotional maturity and the things that kids don't, know how to regulate yet. So what advice would you give to parents or fathers who are, struggling with a kid who's lashing out or a kid that just doesn't want to listen? I mean, you said you've seen it yourself through convicted felons versus, highly successful people. What's that commonality that they all kind of see?
It's kind of meeting them where they are. I think is the general lesson or the way I've been able to deal with it. And that sounds very easy, but it's very difficult because there's typically a lot of emotion involved in those encounters, those engagements. So
Well, it
if it's
requires
like,
humility, right? Because you have to inherently shelf your wants, needs, desires, or whatever for that situation in lieu of the other person.
yeah, and it's incredibly difficult. I've I've gotten a lot better, but I used to be a tyrant with my children. And for better or worse, I always call my eldest, because she was the first, my training wheels, right? Like I didn't know anything about anything until she came along. And unfortunately, I had to learn through my mistakes with her, and still made mistakes down the line, but the brunt of those mistakes she felt. And so I've had to atone for those mistakes many, many, many times. But I've learned that if I'm if I'm having a bad day, I know anything's going to set me off. So I start to coach myself away from allowing myself to be in a situation that's going to trigger me, even if it comes across as slightly rude. So, for example, my child, I know I'm going to blow my lid, right? And my one of my kids is like nagging me, Dad, come and play with me. Dad, come and play with me. And I'm ready to lose it. I'll say, I need to go outside for a minute. And I might have a tone in the way I say it, but I need to escape that situation with as little collateral damage as possible so that I can come back and address the thing in the proper, even if I have to say, I'm sorry that I left in that way. But I'd rather that than do something or say something I'm going to regret for many, many years. So
Yeah,
it's it's a lot of practice.
and I think it boils all down to the dad, and how well they can model that behavior themselves. So one of the things that I've realized dealing with my past traumas is that I'm not healing it to handle future trauma. I'm healing it to learn how to handle good emotions like joy and not feel guilty. And so my kids get to experience that without having to go through all that trauma. And so, like, it's fighting that battle that they don't have to fight, right? And so like we are gaining an emotional intelligence being in brotherhoods and learning from other people's mistakes. So we're leveling up faster than we would if we had isolated and shoved it down. And then we're passing that to our kids gift wrapped, compared to what the world would do for them. The world would brutalize them into that position eventually if they didn't have a victimhood mentality, right? If they had a victor mentality. So, it's just all in all, the brotherhood, the emotional intelligence, all those things are so crucial, but they all start with the dad, and that's why it's so important. I think that's why we all work so hard to really reach out to the dad first, because the dad can set the example and set the bar.
And the dad oftentimes is the one that's lagging behind, unfortunately, behind the mom, right? The mom is by and large like up here, and we have to try to meet them kind of where they're at so we can be a true partner in this journey. Even if, I don't wish this on anyone, but even if you are co-parenting, right? There still needs to be that responsibility and that leveling up for both. And I always, again, I always put the onus on the father, because I see it way too often where the dad is like absent or not present, and there's always some kind of strife that the mom is trying to drag the dad to be kind of a part of things, and it doesn't necessarily always add up.
Yeah, and it's even more difficult, in those early years too, when the kids are the youngest. Like one of the things my wife and I are struggling with right now is my son. He's almost 2.5. He's a big dude for two. And my daughter's 7.5 months old. She's a tiny little peanut, and she's sitting in her car seat the other day, and my son's like, making goo goo gaga faces at her, seems happy, and then he just reaches in there and starts clawing her freaking eyes, and I'm like, bruh, what are you doing? Like, first thing I did was spank his little butt, and I got upset at him, and I lost my temper a little bit, and I caught myself later. I was like, man, I felt so guilty about it, but after that, I made it a mission that, we had just spoken to another guest, Adam Allred, and I've spoken to him about some things and discipline and stuff. And he gave me some good advice to just research everything you do. And so that's what I was doing. My wife and I got on online and started researching how do you deal with a kid in a healthy way, but still, actively punish them. And so one of the things they said was, don't tell them what they did wrong, tell them what they could do right, so they have something to focus on that's positive. Stop telling them no, tell them a correction. And so we've been working on that, and he's been much better this week after that. So yeah, it's a struggle, man, because my wife, she's not a screamer, she's not a yeller, but she finds herself, raising her voice and her tone, and sometimes yelling at him. And I try to tell her, hey, simmer down. Same thing for me. She holds me accountable, but it's not easy, man, especially when you got 202. That's a gauntlet, man. And you're both exhausted. You're both stressed out of your mind. And then we as men, we carry so much stress anyways. Women are a good way of getting it out. They, gossip to each other, chat, whatever the case may be, but we internalize our problems. And then we're wearing so many hats, we don't really get to show that stress, because it's not healthy for us to show our partners their stress, because we are the leaders, we have to lead. So that's why, like George and some of our guests have said, like, it's such a huge thing to have a few nights a week, like where you just go and, like Adam Allred said, go have a campfire, or like George has said previously, like have a night where you just spend time with your guys, even if it's online, and just say, hey, like what's going on with you this week, so that you can vent, because the healthier you are, like Brandon said, the healthier your family is. So yeah, it's a struggle, man. So I get it.
I feel for you, man. The 202 thing is real. I've never had kids that close in age, so I'm always in awe. The fact that you have your hair well put together right now says a lot about you being able to handle stress. Because as you can see, I've let that go a long time ago.
It's thinning, bro. I'm about to have to do something.